welcome back to another episode of the Keep It Hoop podcast. And for those of you watching on YouTube, welcome back. Before we get started, if you are watching or listening on YouTube, please hit the thumbs up button, subscribe. We got some great content coming out, especially with the season underway or starting. And comment below on if you have anything you want us to cover, any questions, any suggestions, feedback. It's all appreciated. All right, so again, like I said, the season's starting, and we wanted to do a little bit of a predictions episode. We're going to start with the Eastern Conference, the Western Conference. So which teams are going to make the playoffs, and then we'll talk about award predictions. So in the East, I think the Bucks end up with the best regular season record again. I think with their core coming back, and obviously they lost some pieces, and that's going to hurt, but I think the depth that they did lose, they will be able to make up for with, the pieces they did pick up. And then Drew Holiday is obviously a huge pickup, giving Giannis that third star, to be able to create his own shot. And obviously Milwaukee's a team that really prides itself on its defense with Budenholzer, at the helm. And you have Chris Middleton and Giannis, who are both good defenders, but you add Drew Holiday, who is what a lot of NBA stars consider the best perimeter defender in the league right now, right? So the defense is gonna be good. Drew will, he's not someone who takes a lot of threes, but he's a very capable shooter. So you're not clogging up the lane anymore for Giannis. Guys like DiVincenzo will get more of a spotlight and a bigger role, and I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. And I think Giannis is just too good in his at this point in his career to really for them not to end up with the best record in the NBA. And the granted the East have gotten a lot better, and I'm sure it's gonna be a theme we talk about, but the East isn't the joke that people used to make about it 5-6 years ago, where you had Miami and I guess Indiana and Chicago, and then you had everyone else who was pretty bad. And again, I think George Hill is someone they'll miss. I think Wes Matthews they'll miss. And Kyle Korver and some of his shooting they'll miss. But look, you bring back DJ Augustine, who's a very capable player, was a starting point guard for an Orlando team that went to the playoffs last year. Bobby Portis is, I think, another stretch big that'll help. Solid defender. And then you have again the draft picks: Jordan Nwora, Sam Mill, Rajon Tucker. We don't really have an idea of how big of a role they'll have, but I mean, I think they'll be fine. And I think the interesting thing is Giannis has increased his scoring and rebounding, I think, the last 7 years. And I'm not saying he's gonna do that. I'm not saying he's not gonna, but the man is obviously very talented, and I think, with him and Chris, coaching staff, and coming back, and then with even Brooke, and kind of the role he's carved out for himself, and then with Budenholzer, I think it'll be fine. Have them going, finishing first. I think some people will disagree with me on this one. I actually have Philly second. I think Brooklyn's a better team overall. I think they have, a better roster. I think they'll be more dangerous in the playoffs. But they have more pieces returning, or at least, like Brooklyn has to find a way to ease KD into everything else. And I know they've had practice, but once the games start and you're playing, regular season games, it's a bit different. I do think Kyrie and KD will miss games, whether it's through, fingers crossed, but, they are injury prone. Not KD, not as much injury prone as much as the one injury he had, but Kyrie's always been injury prone. And then I think you will just see them rest some games because they do have depth on their team. And, whether it's back-to-backs or, 4 games in 6 nights or, any kind of stretches like that, or even if it just, just rest, I do think KD and Kyrie, they're not going to play all 72 games. And I think Philly, you can have similar concerns about Ben and Joel because they're injury prone to a degree as well. And that's a fair assessment and fair argument to make. But, I just really like what they did in the offseason. And they don't have to really integrate too many of the big pieces. I think Seth fits in seamlessly. They need shooting. And if Seth is nothing else, he is shooting. And I do think, Seth's driving abilities and playmaking is a little bit underrated. He's not elite at it by any means, but I will say that he's a more overall all around, or more a better rounded player, or a more well-rounded player, I should say, than I think people give him credit for. I think Danny Green is another piece. You bring in a veteran, can give you some shooting and defense, and I think Danny Green being able to slide out of the starting lineup and kind of just focusing on what he needs to do and then exerting whatever effort he can when he is playing is, I think, better. I think his role was a little bit too big for him in LA. That being said, obviously, he still had his moments and whatnot, but I do like that. And Philadelphia is a team that, myself, I've talked about in the past, or written about, or posted about how Philly has been immature or just haven't been focused enough or disciplined enough. And I think you bring in a champion like Danny Green, back to back champion at that. And obviously he has his rings from San Antonio. He knows what it takes, and he I think it's a good sign for the locker room as well. And I like Tyrese Maxey. We talked about this on the draft episode, when we covered or summarized the draft and kind of how we felt reactions to it. If you haven't listened to that, go check that out. Again, it's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that stuff. But I mean, I think Tyrese Maxey is another good guy. Fits the roster. And when you have two talented guys like Joel and Ben, it really is just plugging in the holes because you just want to maximize what they have. And I think last 3-4 years, while the team has done pretty good, they haven't been able to maximize it. And I think this is as close to a team you can maximize the talent they have as maybe we've seen. Obviously when they had JJ Redick and stuff, it kind of it worked better, but definitely an improvement from last year. And I am excited to see Doc with this team as well. Um, you have the Nets. I have them at third. I think. Look, I saw Kyrie and KD play. They looked fine. Um, Dinwiddie coming off of a great year. I think he'll be fine. Then you have guys like TLC, who's proving himself to be a very solid rotational player. Joe Harris, fits pretty much any team, but obviously with this one as well brings the shooting, and some defense. DJ and Jared Allen are gonna do their things and rim protect, rim run. Um, Look, again, I'm a Knicks fan, diehard Knicks fan. I hate to see Brooklyn win, but it is nice to see, for just being a basketball fan in general, an NBA fan, or KD being back. The league just felt weird without him and Steph. So to have them both back and hopefully healthy, staying healthy, is going to be fun to watch. But I think, it'll be interesting also to see what Steve Nash what his, leadership strategy and some of the sets they run will be. But I think the team is just too talented to finish lower than fourth. And I have them at third. Um, Boston, they're going to start with Kemba injured. I think he's supposed to play starting mid-January, so he's gonna miss about 3-4 weeks. Um, Tatum and Brown, should keep improving, and they already have taken big steps every year almost. Um, but they don't have a lot of bench depth outside of Thompson and Teague as of now. And granted, guys like Nesmith and Peyton Pritchard might step up. Boston has had guys, kind of over, I would say, over achieved to a degree, and just I think Brad Stevens is obviously a good coach, and Marcus Smart being inserted in the lineup I think is fine because he did that in the playoffs, and he plays a lot of the minutes anyways. But yeah, I think the bench depth will be something to keep an eye on, especially when they play hard teams and they have some of the longer road trips. Obviously, those are trips where you need your bench to play bigger minutes and bigger roles than maybe usual. Um, I have them at fourth because I think Tatum is gonna take another step, especially into putting himself in the top 10, top 15 player conversation. I would say top 20, 25 right now to start the season. But um, I don't know. I mean, Kemba had a solid season last year for sure, but I think he didn't look great in the playoffs. So maybe it's just recency bias. And like I still like Kemba. I still think he's a good player. But until I see him really be like Charlotte Kemba, which I don't know if we will ever see again, but if I think that's what it would take for the Celtics to finish top two, top three in the East. Um, I have the Heat fifth, and yes, they made the finals. They brought back pretty much all their big pieces except Jay Crowder, who played decent minutes on that team. But I do think they were a team that benefited and thrived in that weird environment that was the bubble. They're still a good team, but I don't know if they will be the same great team in the regular season. I think they're more equipped for the playoffs, and the kind of grit and grind, slower paced, defensive minded team game that the playoffs often can turn into. Um, again, they're still a good team, but I think they finish behind Boston. If you told me Miami finishes above Boston, I wouldn't, it wouldn't be ridiculous. But I personally I'm more confident that the Boston will be above them. And it sucks because I think part of their slip down, or at least my expectation of them in the regular season, isn't even because I expect Miami to play worse, or that they're gonna be bad. I just really like what the other teams in the conference did. And outside of Boston, I think Philadelphia, Milwaukee, and Brooklyn have just all gotten better. Um, and again, that's not to say Miami won't make another run in the playoffs, but I have them fifth. I have Toronto at sixth. They lost Marc Gasol, Serge Ibaka, and I do think those, while they're not superstar names, will still, that loss will be felt between leadership and defense. Um, but between Lowry, Pascal, OG, Van Vliet, I think they have more than enough of their core to remain good. And I've been someone who's counted out Toronto in the past, and when it was DeMar and Kyle Lowry going up against LeBron, I think I used to I used to overestimate what they would do and then got burned. So I think I'm kind of just making up for that. But Nick Nurse is an outstanding coach, and hopefully I'll get to do a video on some of the stuff he does. But whether it's just inside the locker room or on the court X's and O stuff, I mean, he's done a great job of maximizing the talent they have. They have Larry's just a constant winner, and they have Van Vliet, who secured the bag, and he's going to be able to play confident and comfortable in Toronto, hopefully. Pascal, admitted to not being himself in the bubble and just not really having fun playing basketball. I think that was more of a fluke than what we should see, because during the season he was fine. Um, I think he takes another step. I think OG takes another step, and he's improved gradually over the years. And I think, I think with their chemistry and their veteran leadership experience, and even just the talent they have, they finish sixth. I have the Hawks at seven, which might come back to bite me because I do think there are a decent amount of ifs, and but I am hopeful about this team. I'm a huge fan of Trae Young. He's one of my favorite players in the league, but and I think I do think that the signing of Bogdan was huge. And why that's so big, and even the Gallinari one. Why I think both of those things are so big is because it obviously gives them more scoring and depth and playmaking, but I think it also allows Trey to play off the ball a bit more, or at least that's that's the hope. Um, and I say hope just because Steph is obviously someone we talk about, who is one of the, if not probably the greatest shooter of all time, but he has an insane handle, and he can shoot off the balls, and pass and play make and play this pick and roll. But what makes him so elite and dangerous is the fact that he can and is willing to play off the ball. Now, I don't doubt that Trae Young can play off the ball. If you tell him to stand in a corner and shoot 10, catch and shoot threes in a game, I don't doubt he'll make a good amount of them. But is he willing to? And I think he is, which is why I think the signing is so good. You hate to see a situation where And again, if you've ever watched any of our videos or listened to our podcast, we do talk about James Harden as being the guy that is probably capable of playing without the ball, but doesn't do it well. And it's not James Harden hate because I don't love the way he plays, but I still think James Harden is one of the best players in the league. I do hope he finds a way to win sometime, but I mean he's kind of the poster child of guys who aren't great at playing off the ball. And granted, a lot of the league stars are kind of like that today, at least compared to before. That being said, going back, I do like the Gallinari and Bogdanovich signing a lot, and I have high hopes for this team, and there are still a lot of things to, um, you know, keep an eye on. How Cam Reddish and Kevin Huerter's improvement, and I think that will have at the end of it a big impact on what their ceiling is. Because look, I being a Duke fan, I love Cam Reddish. I thought he was great in college, and I thought he would have a pretty solid rookie season. He struggled to say the least, and I'm kind of putting that nicely because, man, there were times where he didn't look like he belonged out there, and he looked lost, at least with the ball. And he's had some nice games here and there, and I think he looked better in preseason. And this is gonna be something I talk about with the Phoenix Suns as well. But this is the first time this team, or at least the young guys on this team, right? Because obviously Rondo and Clint Capella and Gallinari have played on teams with expectations. But this is the first time Trey and Kevin Huerter and Cam Reddish and Hunter and those guys are playing on an NBA team with expectations. So guys like myself and guys who are on TV, the media, fans, there's gonna be a lot more attention on the Hawks now. And when you're playing with that, it's different. It's different, and it's not just we're not getting the respect. We're playing with house money. There's nothing to lose. It's different. Some guys are built for it, some aren't. So we'll get to see that this year. I have this one was, or so I had Washington eighth, right? And I had to make a decision between the Hawks and the Pacers because I personally had the Wolves making it to the playoffs regardless. I just didn't know where, and this is kind of just what I ended up going with. But we all know what Bradley Beal can do. He showed last year that he is what Stephen A would call a bona fide stud, right? I mean, he shoot off the dribble, he can catch and shoot, he can cut, he's a solid defender, he can play make. I mean, averaging 30, like he is what we thought he was and more, right? Bradley Beal is a great player, and Russell Westbrook was looking solid in preseason this year. I know he only played one game, but he had some of that bounce back, and I expect him to have another good year because if you erase the bubble memory, because that was, as a Russell Westbrook fan, that was a tough time to watch Russ. But in the regular season, before quarantine and COVID and all that, Russ was having a very good season. Like there were stretches where Russ was the best player on Houston, and I expect him to be a little bit more motivated again. Not more motivated because I don't ever question his motivation, but I'll say playing a bit more angry, and I think he's gonna have another good year. And along with the continued development of Denny. Side note, if you haven't watched that video, finally hit 1,000 views. Thanks to everyone for that. Definitely go check that out. We'll have the link somewhere above. And then we had Rui Hachimura. His improvement will be something to keep an eye on as well. And then you still have a decent team around them, right? You have Thomas O'Brien and Bertans, who's going to fit in very nicely with Russ and continue to do so with Bradley Beal. So you have some good scoring punches, and I think defense will be something that we need to keep an eye on. I think getting that shirt up is going to be important because you look at some of the teams in the East and you do have some good defensive teams. Celtics are a solid defensive team. Miami's a good defensive team. Toronto's a good defensive team. Philadelphia and Milwaukee are great defensive teams, right? So you're definitely going to have, your work cut out, but I just think they're too talented not to make the playoffs. So that's my East playoff race or standings, right? I have Milwaukee, Philadelphia, Brooklyn, Boston, Miami, Toronto, Atlanta, and Washington. Short, summary of why I didn't go with Indiana. They return All-Star, Sabonis, who I love, very efficient, consistent, and a big man we don't see too much of like today. He doesn't, Obviously there are other big men who can pass and be versatile. He's a great passer, but he lives more around the mid range. But he is so efficient. Side note, I mean, I have my fantasy draft tonight for fantasy basketball. So bonus, if you want field goal percentage, points, and a rebound, I've had him for the last 2 years. It's sure thing in like the mid range. You know, if you're not looking for someone in the top two, top three rounds, grab that guy. You will thank me. But I mean, I do think that outside of Sabonis, you have Oladipo, Brogdon, T.J. Warren, really solid core of talented guys, and you have a solid bench and some depth. But both Depot and Brogdon have missed a decent amount of time, in the last few years, and we've yet to see what T.J. Warren do, or what he did in the bubble. We've yet to see it, pan out for a whole season. And not saying he can't do it, but there were too many ifs for this team for me to put them in the playoffs. And if they make the playoffs, I won't be super surprised. But I just had a little bit more confidence in Atlanta. And if you ask me this, tomorrow or last week, maybe it changes. Like I'm still pretty on the fence about this, but for now, I'm going with Atlanta. So we'll go over to the West. I have LA first. I think it's hard to just deny, the Lakers getting first again. Defending champs, the rich got richer. You add Montrezl Harrell, you add Dennis Schroeder, who I mean, that pickup was insane for them to get Dennis Schroeder for what they did, and they they re-signed Markieff Morris and Jared Dudley, and they obviously brought AD back, and then they get Marc Gasol, and they even get some more assurance in Jordan Bell, but they did all that while losing. I get Dwight Howard and Rondo and Danny Green and JaVale, but I just think that Montrezl Harrell and Dennis Schroeder, two really solid guys. Sixth Man of the Year award winner, Montrezl Harrell, and Dennis Schroeder. Man, he keeps improving, right? And he's carved himself a really nice role, and I know he wants a bigger role, and part of the reason why he said he didn't want to come to LA before he got traded, right? But I mean, he's here now, and look, this is as good of a chance as he's ever gonna get, at least so far in his career as he's gotten, to win a ring, and he's gonna be motivated. Some people might bring up, is he gonna try to do too much? I think it'll be fine. I think he's a very solid piece for that team, and I think they're gonna be just fine. And the Clippers second. PG seems as motivated as ever, and I know I've spoken about how sometimes I think he speaks too much or just gets in his own head. I don't think this is the case. I genuinely, from seeing his play, he looks locked in. I'm hoping the best for him because I want PG to do well. I think he gets a lot of hate, and look, I've poked fun at him, and I've been part of that crowd that that jokes about him. But I do want to see him do well. Look, I think they have more time together, more chemistry now. You get rid of someone who reportedly was part of the chemistry issues. And granted, I don't know what that is like still in there or not. Ty Lue being kind of I'm not saying his X's and O's are bad, but he's known to be a motivator and a player's coach. I think he'll help kind of get everyone straightened out. And I do think Serge Ibaka was a good pickup for them. A better defender than Montrez, and he's not the shot blocker he once was, but I do think he'll help, when they're playing guys like Jokic, for example, who obviously gave them a lot of trouble in the playoffs, right? So I think they still finish second. I think Luke Kennard, who's actually turned himself into a nice player, will be a nice addition to them, give them some depth and scoring, because obviously, I think it's a foregone conclusion that Paul George and Kawhi are going to miss some time as well. And Batum struggled in Charlotte, but I think he has less pressure and just kind of a new start. Maybe he'll have himself, some nice games. I think Reggie Jackson was actually a very serviceable backup last year, and he should be good for them again this year. I have Denver third. Look, they definitely lost some pieces in Grant, Monte Morris left last year. Torrey Craig's in Milwaukee, but I do think Jokic and Murray taking another step or just being what they were in the playoffs will be just good enough. I think that it may even turn out to be a little bit of a blessing in disguise because I do think that this gives MPJ the playing time and chance to really burst onto the scene. I know last year was a little bit of a coming out party already, but I think this year we might see like full on MPJ. Um, and then because MPJ moves up in minutes, I think now you get guys like Bull Bull having more opportunity as well. Um, I don't think there's too much to say, but I mean, I think that system and that team, they have all mastered what their roles are, and I think they're just all really bought into the system. And if Jamal Murray can play like what he did in the playoffs, and obviously he's not going to score 50 every game, but man, that team is it's a good team, well coached, and again, they have all the right pieces, and everybody's you know bought in, and I don't think you can see them falling past 3. I have Portland at 4, and one of the teams I am most excited to watch this season because of the additions they made. Um, they got Rocco from the trade, not the defender he once was, but he can still play a big part in their team, and they get some wing depth which is something Portland seems to have never had, in the Dame Lillard years. But they finally have a lot of it now, um, and it's almost I think too much to a degree, but I do really like what they did off season as well. You have you obviously bring back Melo, and you have Derek Jones, and Enes Kanter comes back for a backup big position, which I think that was actually a pretty big signing as well because they didn't have that big man depth last year. When Zach Collins went down in the playoffs, you saw Wenyen Gabriel have to get minutes in the playoffs and look, Wenyen Gabriel tried his ass off, but he just could not keep up with Bron and AD. And nobody stops Bron and AD, but he just a little too small, a little too thin, and Cantor's never been a great defender, never will be, but as a big body guy, give you minutes, good rebounder, solid offensive player, and even spot starts, right? Because when Nurkic went down with the injury, Cantor was the starter for that team in the playoffs when Portland made the run, right? So I do like Portland a lot, and I think they go back up to 4th here. I have Dallas at 5th, and I love what Dallas did in the offseason. I think they won the offseason. Losing Seth Curry will hurt, but I think they have enough offense to fill what they lost. And they got so much better defensively. They had a Josh Richardson, who was a plus defender, and drafted Josh Green, who will be a versatile defender, being able to guard probably 2 through 4 day one. And he gives them some shooting, right? He's not obviously knocked down, but he is someone that will be able to at least knock down the open ones, and he's not a liability. And we all know how good Luka is, and will obviously, this team will go as he goes, but the ceiling of this team, if you will be determined by how healthy and good KP is. If Kristaps Porzingis can be the Kristaps Porzingis from the end of the Knicks days, then the Mavs could be a really scary team with the potential to make a serious run because that offense again is super efficient with Luka at point and Rick Carlisle, who's another coach, who I think is a basketball genius, really has that team running on all cylinders. I have Utah under Dallas. And now I won't lie, I feel like I count the Jazz out every year. And not even from the playoffs, but from just like improving and just being the team that they end up being. But they have shown that they're a very solid team, with its focus on team defense, effort, and just playing together. Coach Quinn Snyder's another underrated coach in the league. Has these group of guys that are bought in, very balanced, and kind of aside from Donovan Mitchell, because I still think that they put too much offensive pressure on him at times. That being said, I was surprised about the Gobert signing because they got Derek Favors back, which is, I think, a good signing for their defense and just experience. But they did also sign or draft Udoka Azubuike. So, I thought they were getting 2 defensive rim protecting guys who more or less do what Gobert do and just obviously not as good. But I was surprised. They don't really have any additions besides that. They drafted a second round pick Elijah Hughes, but this team, as always, will be solid, blue collared, and like I mentioned before, Donovan Mitchell, is someone who had his playoff coming out games and moments with Jamal Murray, and to see if he can transition that into taking another step in the regular season, I think will be the key for this team. The Phoenix Suns, we finally get to see Devin Booker in the playoffs. At least that's what I'm envisioning. And the Suns will no doubt be one of the most intriguing teams to keep an eye on after their Cinderella undefeated run in the bubble. With Chris Paul now on board and Etwan Moore and Jay Crowder here, you have the Suns with a nice balance of veterans and young talent and some fight, man. Like, we get a lot of people today talking about how some teams are soft, the league is soft, and I get that. I agree, but this team between like Devin Booker is a competitor and Chris Paul, we all know, is a dog. And if he's calling Jay Crowder a dog, like that team will fight. I don't think they're going to be pushovers like they have been. And Phoenix is going to be exciting, hopefully, again. And it's nice to see. And they have other guys like, Bridges, Saric. Like they have solid pieces. I do think a big part of how good they could be, or if they can be even better than what I am predicting, is to see how they play with expectations. Now, we talked about this with Atlanta, but they are finally playing with expectations. Phoenix players and coaching staffs and fans said we don't get enough respect. We don't get enough nationally televised games. Well, people have expectations for you guys now. People expect you guys to be good. Now, guys like Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton, much like the Atlanta guys, I'm sure they've had pressure on them as individual players and have done so, and have led teams in college and high school to championships. NBA is different. They are, again, finally playing as a team or on a team with playoff expectations. And again, it's different. I don't think I think they'll be fine. I don't think they'll shrink under the pressure, but that is something to keep an eye on. And last but not least, I have the Stephen Curry-led Golden State Warriors. I just couldn't count them out. And were it not for Clay and his injury, which obviously sucks, it's a huge blow to the team, the fans, and just the league in general. But Steph and Draymond will be motivated, and they are reloaded with solid roster. Kelly Oubre had a solid season and continues to improve. Andrew Wiggins now has had more time to gel with this team, and it will be interesting to see what kind of role Wiseman has on this team offensively. But regardless of what that ends up being, his defensive impact will just be felt immediately. He's an athletic big, something they haven't really had in the past, and he's going to be a great I think he's going to be a good defender, one-on-one as well. And his rebounding will be, I think, elite or great day one. And I think we've talked about this in the past as well, too. And something that I don't think enough people have talked about. This allows Draymond to go back into being the defensive quarterback and just, really, really just hound and annoy people on defense. Because when he had to worry about rim protecting and too much of the help defense stuff, I think it took him away from what he was, the best at. And I still think he was fine and he was good at those things, but you weren't maximizing Draymond. And I think this really maximizes them with Oubre and Wiggins. You now have a team that's capable of being a solid defensive team. And when Golden State was at its best, they were a good defensive team. And none of those perimeter guys are the defender that Clay is, but hopefully we see a more bought in and focused Andrew Wiggins on the defensive side because he has all the tools to do so. And, Kelly Oubre's always been a solid defender. So I have them 8th. And one team I'm sure people will notice, and if they haven't by now, they will when they are announced, is the Houston Rockets. I had thought about Houston being 7th or 8th, maybe even 6th. But there's just so much uncertainty with that team and James Harden. If James Harden stays, he is good enough, whether he's 100% bought in or not, to get them into the playoffs. I do think so, and because they still have DeMarcus Cousins and John Wall, and they do both look good and healthier. But and both of those guys, on the when we were talking about being worried, are still injury prone. Like they are coming off big injuries. So yeah, they look good in the in the preseason, but if I'm taking everything that the Knicks did in the preseason with a grain of salt, I'm going to do so with every other team. And until I get any kind of confirmation on James Harden, I'm just going to have a hard time saying definitively that they're going to be in the playoffs. Again, if he stays and he's there, I think they do make the playoffs. But I just there's just so much going on that I don't know. And that the James Harden situation with Boogie and John Wall, not having seen them in the league for a whole season plus, we don't really know. But so yeah, looking back, that is Lakers, Clippers, Nuggets, Blazers, Mavericks, Jazz, Suns, Warriors as my 8 teams going to the playoffs in the West. So now that that's over with, we will finish this episode up with award predictions. I have Luka as the MVP. I think he has, and look, Giannis is I think the favorite for a lot of people, and I know a lot of people also have Luka. I think, well, Giannis has won it 2 years in a row, and that's nothing. It's not like 6 or 7 or whatever, but I do think we do see media members and people and fans and just start to get sick and tired of the whole, same person winning the MVP thing, right? Like LeBron, it happened to LeBron. I think something similar could happen to Giannis. And despite Giannis, I'm sure he's going to put up insane numbers and probably have the best regular season record in the East and maybe even the NBA. I think Luka gets it. I think the Mavs take another step in terms of regular season success, and I think Luka is going to continue to improve, and I have him winning the MVP. Defensive Player of the Year, I have Ben Simmons. I think he was in the conversation last year. I think if he can stay healthy, that team is just loaded with talent, and with a new coach and kind of a fresh start, I look for him to continue to be motivated and be the Defensive Player of the Year. The one thing I like about Ben Simmons is he talks about, and how, not like to campaign that he should be Defensive Player of the Year, but he talks about how good he is a defender, and I think you have to kind of have that swag and confidence as a defender, because people have it on offense, right? Like, oh, I can't be stopped. I'm averaging 30 or whatever. I can get whatever shot I want. People got to start talking their talk on defense too, and Ben Simmons does that. Rookie of the Year, I have James Wiseman. I know, like it's kind of a meme, kind of a joke. I had different predictions in my draft review podcast episode, but I have James Wiseman. I think he just, after seeing preseason stuff with the other rookies, I think he's just gonna have the best chance to put up solid numbers with rebounds and blocks and points here and there. Look, I think guys like Obi Toppin have a chance. I think LaMelo obviously has a chance because of the just usage rate I'm sure he'll have. But I think his scoring and shooting percentage is a little bit iffy. So I have James Wiseman. Sixth man, I think Montrezl Harrell gets it in LA. I think we're on the other LA team now, but I think he gets it on the Lakers. Not much changes from when he was on the Clippers. I think he had a really nice role, and I think he's going to be someone who, with the likes of Kuzma can, have some nice bench scoring nights. And, when you're playing with LeBron, right, the pick and roll and mismatches, he's gonna get the opportunities and the looks he's gonna see. I think it's just gonna be, I think he's gonna put up really good numbers. Most improved, I have MPJ. Again, I think with the departures on the Nuggets, I think he finally has an opportunity and gets the minutes to really, take that next step. Coach of the Year, I have Steve Nash. I do think, I thought about Lloyd Pierce because I think that improvement might be not less predicted, but like I think more on the coach as it would be on Steve Nash. But I think if Brooklyn finishes, if a first year coach comes in and they finish, second or third, like a lot of people have them, I think he gets that award. So yeah, that's it. MVP Luka, Defensive Player of the Year. Ben Simmons, Rookie of the Year. Uh, Wiseman, Montrezl Harrell for Sixth Man. Most Improved MPJ, Coach of the Year, Steve Nash. So yeah, that's it. Those are my predictions. Kind of ran them down. Shorter episode, not really, but yeah. Excited for the season. I'm sure some of these I'll get right, some of these I'll get wrong, but I feel good about them for the most part. Just good to have NBA basketball back again, and hopefully everything stays safe with Corona, and hopefully people don't get injured, and we have today, and then right off the bat on or tomorrow, I guess, yeah, tomorrow. Um, for some reason, I thought that the season was starting today, but yeah, with tomorrow, um, we'll have a very good slate of games in the first few days, with Christmas Day being the marquee matchups and the headlining, right? So very excited. Thanks again for watching or listening, whether it's on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast. Um, I'll have the link below to our Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, WordPress, and Spotify if you're watching this on YouTube. Um, be sure, if you are watching this on YouTube, to hit the thumbs up button, like, subscribe, comment, share. Be greatly appreciated. We are trying to do more with this, and any kind of support, feedback is always appreciated. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I think we'll continue to have a bit more content coming out as the year ends, but stay safe, everyone. Happy holidays, and thanks for watching. Thanks for listening again, and yeah, we'll see you soon.